Good evening. It's April Davis, PI, August 26, 2025. Long time no see, friends. You know, it's been a slow news week. But I have a story here that is of very much interest to me. It's very mysterious. Has anybody heard about the mysterious ghost ship that was lurking off the California coast? If not, stay tuned. Okay, well, here we go. You know, this story in a weird way kind of reminds me of the video I did about the missing Alaska cruise passenger whose body was found in Juneau, Alaska. You know, they still haven't solved that one yet. Here's another weird one that, just like I said, it just kind of has the same weird vibes. I'm going to read some excerpts here from the LA Times about what's been publicly released about this story. Joel Karahara's fishing boat was found off the coast of Northern California without the captain on board. A search by the Coast Guard found no clues as to what happened to Karahara. The fisherman's friends suspect a freak occurrence must have tossed him into the sea. Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. Joel Karahara's fishing boat, the Karahawa, traveled down the coast from Washington towards California waters, keeping a steady course that offered no hint that something had gone terribly wrong. But when Coast Guard crews boarded the boat this month in Northern California, officials found no one on board. Its captain was nowhere to be seen. Somewhere along the roughly 400-mile journey, the 70-year-old Karahawa was lost. On the Karahawa, the fishing gear was set up on the deck. A half-finished cup of coffee was found sitting at the helm, and Karahawa's oatmeal was left unfinished, as if the experienced fisherman suddenly disappeared in the middle of breakfast, said a longtime friend, Heather Burns. His life jacket was found hanging in the boat. Karahawa's friends suspect a freak occurrence may have tossed him overboard somewhere out to sea. Now, that could be. That's the most logical explanation. But to hear about the breakfast, the half-drunk cup of coffee, and the uneaten oatmeal, and nothing was like broken, damaged, spilled, missing, I don't know. That's just, how do you just vanish if somebody tipped the boat and the boat's still standing but the coffee wasn't spilled? Like, you know, that'd be like flying during turbulence and on an airplane and the drinks don't spill. Like, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But let me tell you what I know. Born in Seattle, Karahawa was a professional fisherman who focused on salmon, albacore, tuna, and halibut. But friends and colleagues said Karahawa was a passionate advocate for fish and conservancy, fighting to maintain safe and healthy habitats for fish. Burns said Karahawa was a loyal and dependable friend who would do anything for the people he loved. As a fisherman and advocate, he worked to protect the waters, the fish, and the fishermen that he dedicated so much of his time to. He wasn't there for anybody but the fish, Burns said in regards to his advocacy work. To him, everything tied back to salmon. Karahawa was a board member of Save Our Wild Salmon Coalition, president of the Coastal Trollers Association, and a member of the Pacific Fishery Management Council. Ken Karahawa, his brother, said his brother was always drawn towards fishing and the sea. Their father had owned a boat and a fishing tackle store in Seattle when they were growing up and would spend some summers going out to do commercial fishing. Karahawa, one of three sons, seemed to find a calling in fishing. My dad got the impression that Joel was not going to do anything else. He just wanted to bum around and fish. At one point, he said their father sold their boat in the hope that Karahawa wouldn't spend all of his time fishing. His brother eventually went to college, earned a college degree, and began working for Boeing. But he said Karahawa didn't like his Boeing job, which dealt with the military, that clashed with his personal philosophy. As soon as he was able to save up enough money, he bought a fishing boat, he quit his job, and returned to fishing. He just wanted to go back to fishing. For years, friends and family said Karahawa worked doing what he loved, earning the respect of colleagues along the West Coast and fishing grounds all the way up to Alaska. When he went missing this month, members of the commercial fishing community came together, hoping to find answers. On social media, friends and colleagues looked for information on the Karahawa, hoping he was still on board and something had just kept him from answering calls and messages. The Coast Guard searched more than 18 hours looking for signs of the missing man, but suspended its search on August 13th after finding no trace of Karahawa. Strohmeyer said the Coast Guard would not be the agency to investigate how Karahawa went missing, and there's no indication that another law enforcement agency is looking into the incident. Now let me just sidestep for a moment. I had a case very similar to this, and I can't go into the details, but I had a case very similar to this years ago off the coast of Ventura, and a fishing boat lost, 4 men were lost at sea. And the boat was actually flipped over, and the Coast Guard was very involved. And at first they were like, no, you got to call the sheriff's department. And no, you got to call the Coast Guard. And it was the Coast Guard that did the investigation about the 4 missing men. 3 of which were recovered, 1 of which was never found. And that was the one that I had to investigate, the poor soul that had never been found. But, going back to this story, this seems odd that there are no law enforcement agencies or the Coast Guard involved in investigating what has happened to the missing man. If the Coast Guard's not in charge of this, who is? It says, friends and members of the fishing community along the West Coast and in Alaska are mourning the loss of Karahawa, whom they described as an experienced, meticulous fisherman. He was one of the smartest people I ever met, said Jeremy Brown, a fellow fisherman who knew Karahawa for 35 years. He just was incredibly open, lively, and intellectually curious. Burns, who was taking care of Karahawa's home and cats in Quilcene, Washington, while he was fishing, said she knew something had gone awry when on August the 11th she was unable to get a hold of Karahawa via text or his satellite telephone. The two didn't have an official protocol for when he went fishing alone, but would maintain contact every couple of days. August the 11th marked 4 days since she had heard from her friend, and when she reached out to mutual acquaintances that weekend, she added no one had heard from him for days. That's when she began to worry. Only small clues suggest what might have happened on board the Karahawa. Karahawa had planned to fish for tuna near Oregon and then planned to fish for salmon. But according to the Coast Guard, the Karahawa had maintained a constant southerly course for several days, keeping at 4 knots. The boat's automatic identification system was functioning and showed no signs that anything was wrong. Brown said that steady course is what alarmed his friends and colleagues. Everything was consistent except the boat kept going and crossed the salmon grounds. Brown said, indicating he never stopped to fish for salmon. He didn't call, he didn't radio. When we looked at where his transponder was, he was already down in Oregon. At that point, it was obvious something was badly wrong. Coast Guard crews made several attempts to contact Karahawa via radio calls to the Karahawa and asked other ships and boats in the area to do the same, but no one received a response. On August the 12th, the Coast Guard sent a C-27 fixed-wing plane crew from Sacramento who made visual contact with the Karahawa, noticing that it had been rigged for fishing, its lights were turned on, and a raft was seen on its cradle, but officials said the crew did not find any signs of distress. However, the boat continued on its course, and later the Coast Guard dispatched an MH-60 helicopter from Air Station Astoria to search the area west of Grays Harbor, Washington, making no findings. Crews then searched the boat's path with similar results. On the morning of August the 13th, the Coast Guard boarded the boat near Northern California and confirmed no one was on board. Its safety equipment was still on board. The same day, the Karahawa was towed to Eureka, California, then docked in Humboldt Bay. Our crews diligently searched hundreds of miles, Stroud, Search and Rescue Mission Coordinator for the Coast Guard's Northwest District, said, "We send our deepest condolences to the family." The only clues as to what may have happened, Burns said, are the last messages Karahawa sent to friends the morning of August 8th, the day that friends believe he may have somehow fallen overboard. In a text message early that morning, Karahawa told Burns he had awakened to a foggy morning and he was watching a group of moors, black and white seabirds, fishing near him. All of a sudden, this whale comes up and boils the water less than 50 yards ahead of me. Karahawa texted Burns just before 7:30 a.m. "I slowed down and turned, but boy, it was kind of close. The good news is lots to eat for whale singular, and birds." Now, first of all, I don't know what that means. A whale comes up and boils the water? I kind of have a picture in my mind, but if anybody knows what that actually means, look it up. I Googled it. The only thing I can find is a financial term in the finance industry. What is it when a whale comes up and boils the water? And he did say whale singular, but I can tell you that whales, like dolphins, they travel in pods. There are some breeds of whale that travel, solo, but most whales travel in pods. So where you see one whale, there's probably a lot of others that you don't see. Now, a half hour later, he then texted another person that he knew to be fishing in the same region, maybe to give them a heads up that there was a whale in the area, but then nothing. Brown said something must have tossed Karahawa off his boat. Fishing alone out at sea is not recommended, but Brown said it's a common practice, especially amongst experienced fishermen. Kind of like, they said about the lady in Alaska from the cruise ship, the missing passenger, that you should never hike alone in the wilderness. But people do it. This guy, experienced fisherman. But he went out by himself. He wasn't wearing his life vest. Friends and family say they will hold memorials to Karahawa in Quilcene in Seattle at some point. Now think about this. If the boat did get intercepted by a whale, wouldn't there be some sort of damage to the boat? Like a dent on the hull, or the boat would be leaking, or if it just bumped the boat so far to the left or to the right enough to toss him overboard, don't you think his half-drank cup of coffee that was at the helm would have spilled along with his breakfast? See, that's the part of this story that bothers me. He's suddenly not on board like some freak thing happened, but everything on board is fine, like the emergency life raft is in its rack. The life vest is hanging on the boat. I've read in other articles that the fishing poles were up on the deck in use. The coffee cup was at the helm, half drunk. I don't know. What do you think happened to Joel Karahawa? Please place your opinions in the comments. And thank you, my YouTube family, for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time.
It's nothing new, but it's so good to see you. We do this every day, and I'm still so amazed.